All right, folks, we're going to finish up the name and explain chart. We're going to move on to the last step, which is step 4. So get excited. Okay, so it's time. We are going to finish up and we're going to, whoa, hello. All kinds of stuff going on here. Okay, sorry about that. We're going to do step 4 in the name and explain. And this is where we actually name and explain. We name the literary devices that the author uses, and we explain the effect the devices have on the meaning of the poem. So kids get really tripped up in this step. They start freaking out. They're like, I don't know, it's too hard, I don't know what to look for. Listen, it's not that serious. All you do is see what you notice, and you do the best you can. So I'm not going to go through every single tiny little word in this poem. That's not the point of this. This is supposed to be a strategy that helps you kind of organize your thoughts about the poem, but it doesn't have to take millions of hours and just be the worst thing that ever happened to you. So basically I'm going to talk about what stood out to me, and here we go. So at the beginning, let's look at these literary devices. I want to say that one thing I notice over here is that there's some alliteration. The silent, somewhere, stairs, so steep, some occasion. And the author, definitely puts all these S sounds in there. And what is it doing? It's kind of moving the poem forward, and it highlights the silence, and it highlights that they want to be somewhere else, and that the stairs are really steep. So all of those things kind of stand out because the sounds are together, so it just brings more attention to anything that has that S sound. And then as we go forward, also the skeleton of a kitchen stands out because of the alliteration as well. So I'm going to put alliteration, and that it highlights all the words that have the S sound, and it just makes them stand out more, and it shows their importance. So that's one thing that I would notice. And also see, okay, so my eyes were tricking me because I was going to go back and talk about shadow, but that's not an S sound, it's just an S, so never mind, forget it. All right, the next thing I want to talk about is that skeleton of a kitchen, because that is figurative language. So the author's putting in some figurative language here, because there's not actually a skeleton of the kitchen. I promise you that. I actually went online and I Googled to find a picture of the kitchen. That's the actual kitchen in the Anne Frank house. So it does not have a skeleton, right? Because if it did, it would be more like, here's the skeleton in the kitchen. No, there's not a literal skeleton in the kitchen. So the author's using figurative language, and students will sometimes be like, oh no, I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to name it. Is it a metaphor? Is it a simile? I can't remember. That's okay. If you can't remember, if you're not sure, if you're in a test and you're like, oh no, I don't know what it is. It's figurative language, and that's okay to call it that. Okay, I think it is actually a metaphor, but and using that idea of the skeleton of the kitchen, it brings to mind, or it enhances the association of the museum with death, right? Because when something's a skeleton, it's been dead, and we are talking about the Holocaust here, and Anne Frank did die in the Holocaust. So it just kind of brings to mind that death feeling, the seriousness of it. And kitchens are not supposed to be places of death. They're supposed to be warm and friendly and places where people gather to eat together and sustain life. And so that opposite with the skeleton really associates the poem with death, the idea with deaths. And then similarly, when we look at this figurative language, arrows of a barbed wire, because she's talking about, they're looking at a map, and each of its arrows are a barb of wire. Barbed wire is what was on those fences at the concentration camps to stop the people from escaping. And they don't literally have barbed wire on the map, because this is what the Anne Frank Museum part looks like, the part that's not the house, right? So you would kind of walk through here, and look at maps and stuff of different countries and how the Holocaust affected them. And the maps would look something like this, right? Well, if it'll ever download, let's see. Of course, sometimes we have to wait on technology, huh? And so you can see like an arrow on a map would look like this. There's not literally barbed wire at the Anne Frank Museum on the maps. People would get hurt, right? They don't do that. So what this author is talking about with the arrows of barbed wire, just that the different movements of people during the Holocaust were deadly. Those barbed wire, it enhances the association again with death and the seriousness of people moving around, being moved around by Nazis. Anne Frank was moved from her home or her secret hiding place to a concentration camp. So again, we have figurative language, and it actually is providing kind of the same meaning, that association with death, association with violence, and it reminds the reader of the really horrible circumstances that Anne Frank was in as she was making those amazing statements about life and light and hope. What else do I want to say? We've got some repetition down here. Remember we were talking about that when we were looking at the words, but raining is up here and raining is down here. That's a literary device, repetition. Oh, hello spelling. Thank gosh for spell check. Well, see, spell check's going to help me out. Teacher spelled repetition wrong. Okay, here we go. Repetition of the word rain. Enhances the gloomy mood. Well, enhances the gloomy mood. There we go. And down here again we have, well, it's really imagery, right? The pure center of light within the dark circle of his demons, talking about the Van Gogh Museum. And I actually did go and Google and look for some images from the Van Gogh Museum, and I thought this was really cool. This is a self-portrait that Van Gogh did, and you can see how there are, you know, there are kind of sad tones with the darkness under the eyes and the blue and everything, but there are also those light pieces as well, and that's what really is the summary of what's going on in this poem. Is this author has noticed that people are finding beauty and light and hope and inspiration in the darkest of times, and that's what draws people to go to these museums and to help find hope and light in their own lives. So the imagery of the light within the dark is really kind of the theme of the poem. I'll say exemplifies. There's a fancy word, right? If I could spell it. Exemplifies. Or exemplifies just means provides an example of, so it's not that fancy, but it sounds cool. Use it in your short answer. Your teacher will go nuts, like, whoa, exemplifies, you get an A, good job. So the imagery of the light within the dark exemplifies the theme of the poem, right? It just captures the main idea really beautifully. If we picture the dark center of light, the pure center of light within the dark circle of the demons, it's kind of a cool idea. So I mean, I didn't do anything real crazy. I've never actually said whether I thought these figurative language things were metaphors or similes or whatever. I mean, I actually do kind of think that they're metaphors. But if you can't think of the exact name, that's okay, as long as you know that it's not literal. She's not literally saying it's barbs of wire, or literally that there's this skeleton in the kitchen, or that the kitchen's made of bones or something. If you can guess that it's figurative, that's something you would definitely be able to write about on a test, or if you had an assignment or something in college on an essay. So that's basically it for step 4 of the name and explain. You just see what really sticks out. I did not talk about every single little thing that's in the poem. That's not the point of this. It's just to see what seems like super important and then jot down some notes on it. And you can always, you know, not in a test, but in class, you could always check with your teacher or check with a partner and see if they kind of feel the same thing, because you're going to notice different things. Different things stand out to different people, and that's okay. That's kind of the point of literature. It means something different to everybody, and that's why it's awesome, because we're all going to find different stuff that's pretty cool as we read. I'm sure you notice things that I didn't point out, and that is awesome. And if you notice something different, you should definitely jot it down, because your thoughts are valuable. So next we're going to kind of move on and go into the quiz section, and I'm going to give you a short answer and I'm going to give you a little crossover short answer so we can kind of think about how the poem ties together with the piece about the 9/11 memorial and about how both of those things tie together with the Brooklyn Bridge piece, because they're all three about remembering and reflecting, and how objects and places help us do that. So I'm going to stop talking now and we can move on.